Hey, this is Easy, and I'm making a quick comparison between the three fighter classes in Lost Ark. I've been getting a lot of comments and questions about a breakdown of each of the three subclasses, and while I do have a fairly good idea of my own class as well as the other two classes from friends who are playing those classes, I just want to give a clear disclaimer that none of these opinions are backed by substantial evidence. There are no DPS meters nor uh, any form of data that we can manage to obtain that will give us a good idea of what kind of damages that each subclass can do. But the main point that I want to give with this comparison guide is number one, what kind of buffs and utilities they offer to the party, and number two, um, their playstyles and what you can expect by playing the class. So let's first get started with Battle Masters. Battle Masters were perceived to be a little bit weak during the closed beta, and a lot of Koreans have dismissed them as a class mainly because of that reason. But in OBT, the entire combat system has been revamped to support a faster playstyle, and Battle Master I think has seen one of the biggest benefits from that change. They have really good party buffs in the form of defense penetration in two of their skills, as well as a 25% crit chance buff from their 16% movement speed and 16% attack speed buff. They also have really fast rotations, and they have the highest mobility out of any melee class. So Battle Masters really shine in environments where they can support the party and play around the boss in a really fast pace. However, there are a lot of negative downsides to playing Battle Master, and most of the feedback has been related to their long animations. Many of the skills that Battle Masters use have fairly long animations that can be difficult to plan around the boss's rotations, so it can be very easily punished in PvE environments, and that leads to a lot of deaths. And fighter classes in general are not very tanky. They don't have many defensive stats, and their health pool isn't that high either. So a lot of Koreans have perceived them to be weak or weaker than the other two fighter classes. However, it seems like they're a lot stronger than what people were initially expecting. So don't be discouraged by rumors that Battle Masters are weak. They're a perfectly fine class that will see even stronger showings with lower cooldowns and better mana regenerations. Infighters, they're the next class in line. They're the middle class out of the two subclasses, and their main strength lies in their ability to chip out the boss's weakness bar much better than any of the other classes. Infighters are compared to destroyers in that aspect, and thus they play an important role in parties. It's more of an invisible role, as it's hard to notice their impact in Guardian raids and dungeons, but they're the kind of class that you miss when they're not in your party. They have passable mobility in form of different skills that allow them to spec into small dashes, so they can move around the battlefield a little bit easier. And they also have one of the better evasion skills, which is 2 spacebars at the same time for a cost of longer cooldown, or a single spacebar for a shorter cooldown. And also another positive thing about Infighters is that they're very much an identity-driven class. They lack a Z and an X identity skill, but in exchange, their entire rotation and build identity and build theory revolves around their using the green and yellow energy. So if you're into a class that is very much about the identity, then Infighter is a really good class to get into. However, they do have pretty difficult resource management system because of their identity. So it's a very much a two-sided coin, a two-sided sword, a double-edged sword. Sorry. You'll find yourself, if you mismanage your skills, you'll find yourself in situations where you can't do anything. You can't cast any of your skills because you are lacking the yellow resource and you're lacking the green resource. That also means that you have restricted skill selection. So out of all the skills that you can choose, you're restricted to having X amount of yellow skills and X amount of green skills, because you have to be able to manage your resource through uses of those skills. Another really big negative side is that they don't have any party buffs. While you could see their strong weakness damage as a party buff, because it allows your party to have more times where the boss is weakened, there are no hard percentage buffs to damage that infighters bring, unlike the other two fighter classes. For Soul Masters, they are a pseudo melee / ranged hybrid class, and that is one of their main appeals, as well as their main drawbacks for some players who are looking to choose Soul Master. They have really strong bursts, but on the contrary, they also have extremely high cooldowns, or rather relatively high cooldowns compared to other two classes, so their playstyle tends to be a lot slower. They also have a unique resource called Spirit Gauge, which is a very important part of Soul Master's gameplay, and if you mismanage your Soul Gauge, you can find yourself in situations where you can't cast anything and you're not dealing any damage. However, despite all of those downsides, they have a very strong identity, and if you manage your identity correctly, the negative side of having to manage your Spirit Gauge becomes much less of an issue, and their identity allows them to reach buffed state of up to 40% increased damage and 20% reduced cooldown, and a smattering of other really strong offensive buffs that make them extremely potent in situations where you need a lot of damage really quickly. They also have some of the best offensive and defensive utilities out of any classes, not just fighters. They have 4 party buffs in many of the skills that they use that increase party's damage by 20% in their area around them. And they also possess a skill which reduces their damage taken in the entire party by 50%, which is definitely nothing to laugh at when you consider that you can get shieldings from bards, and a lot of the chip damage that you take in guardian raids and raids in general cannot be recovered through recovery potions. So those are the basic breakdowns of the 3 classes. Like I mentioned earlier in the guide, or rather earlier in the comparison, all of these points are ignoring damage. Please keep in mind that the game is at a very early state currently, and this guide and this comparison is mostly to direct players towards the kind of playstyle they wanna have and feel while they invest their time into the game. It's not about damage, and there's a lot of gear and engravings and secondary stat management that can make one class deal more damage than the other and promote a different playstyle entirely for certain engravings. But in the current state, based on the opinions that I've received from other players who are maining these classes, these points seem to be a pretty common perception that they have over their class. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop by my stream or leave any comments, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video.